I could get it done, Dana.
I'm not saying no.
Dana, sign me.
I'm not saying no.
Dana, sign me. Dana, sign me now.
I'm not saying no.
Fantastic.
I knew it. I told you so. I've been predicting this for years. Logan Paul to the UFC. So Dana White went on Impulsive the other day and talking a lot about Jake Paul and Logan Paul in a potential UFC fight. I made a video years ago saying that this would happen. I mean, everything is aligning now. This is probably the perfect time to get the talks going and make a legitimate push for Logan to actually have a fight in the UFC. I actually think the banter between Dana White and Jake Paul actually helps Logan. Dana White is getting more involved with this community. The UFC has done this a few times. Now, Dana White has recently said that he's never wanted to do this type of crossover celebrity thing again, ever since it going pretty sideways with CM Punk. But if you look back, James Toney was a boxer. He was a champion in his own right, a legend in the sport of boxing. And when he crossed over, he went right into the deep end. He had fought Randy Couture, and that went really bad. It was a quick fight. Randy just shot for a low ankle pick, took him down, and choked him out. James Toney was talking a lot of smack, so he kind of walked himself into that kind of fight, and I think Dana White had no problem signing that kind of fight, not trying to build James Toney or get James Toney to come over to the UFC. I think it was just a super fight, and then he made it happen. Then there's the CM Punk one. Was a wrestler, no real combat sport background. He went in. He didn't fight a guy in the top 15. He fought Mickey Gall. I'm pretty sure he was outside the top 15, especially at that time. Yes, because he went to the Ultimate Fighter after that. And CM Punk's fights looked very amateur-esque, and they tried to build him up and train him and do everything they can to give him an opportunity to compete in MMA. And it was just kind of a stain, not a great look. But then you have the outlier, Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar was able to go straight to the top, right? He fought Randy. He fought some other people, Frank Mir. He went straight to the top and competed for a championship very fast. But the thing is, Brock Lesnar was a freak in nature. The dude that was like in the combine for the NFL. He made the Vikings preseason games. He was a collegiate wrestler at a very high level. And the dude was like 300 pounds. So in the cage, even against heavyweights or other champions and other MMA fighters, he was such a monster. So he had an advantage when he was in there. Size, strength, explosiveness, and his wrestling pedigree. Putting that together, he was able to compete right away purely because he was an athletic freak of nature. And if you go watch a documentary on his wrestling upbringing and what he did as a wrestler growing up, crazy. One thing that Dana White immediately asked was, who are you going to fight? First, we got to talk weight class. Logan would have to be in middleweight. He would have to fight at 185. Now, if you look in the top 15 in the UFC at 185, is there someone that Logan Paul could potentially compete against? No. No one in the top 15. Now, you may say, but his boxing skill is really improved. He boxed with Floyd Mayweather. He wrestled in high school. Logan doesn't have a real pedigree when it comes to combat sports. We've seen other people do it and cross over into MMA, Clarissa Shields, for example, but they have a legitimate pedigree in another sport. For example, boxing world champion, competing against people in their weight class at their level. Logan has yet to box somebody who's even in his weight class. JJ had to go up in weight. Obviously, Floyd Mayweather is a legend, but nowhere near the size of Logan Paul. So it's not like Logan was even competing as a boxer and developed this boxing pedigree in his weight class. Okay, so you can kind of scratch his boxing pedigree, even though he shows boxing ability. Then you go wrestling. His wrestling pedigree, you can even say is collegiate. I'm not sure how much he competed or if he even did, but he didn't develop a resume in college as one of the best college wrestlers in the nation. So you look at boxing and wrestling, I would consider his wrestling resume better than his boxing resume. I know that may sound crazy, but he's competed against people who are in his own weight class and at a pretty good level. I don't want to take that away from him. When people try to make a crossover from other combat sports into MMA, we consider them specialists, right? And we see if they can add the other pieces of MMA, the jiu-jitsu, the wrestling, or the wrestling if they're a striker, if they're a kickboxer or a karate guy. Can they add the other martial arts into their skill set so that they can compete with other MMA fighters? Because at this level, especially today, nowadays, not 20 years ago, almost everyone's good at everything. then they're great at a few things. But I think Logan falls somewhere in between Brock Lesnar and CM Punk. So first off, Logan would have to fight against a professional fighter. Perfect world, I think what you can do is pick a combat sport athlete from a different sport who wants to make an MMA run or newly has started an MMA career, and then put him with Logan Paul, because Logan's best chance is against another specialist that has some weaknesses, most likely wrestling. So if you take a striker, either a boxer or a kickboxer, and you put them in there with Logan's going to have to be in there with someone where he has the upper hand in the wrestling department. That gives him his best shot. If someone can out-wrestle him because of the kicking aspect of the striking and MMA and clinch and knees and elbows, if you're training MMA, boxing is not going to be enough for Logan because he's not that great of a boxer just to go in there and be a boxing specialist. Even the best boxers who've crossed over can't do that. So if he can't outstrike somebody, then he's going to get out-wrestled. There's no way out for him. Now, if you put him in there with somebody who he can out-wrestle, and he has a grappling advantage, now he can mix in his striking and his punching and everything that he's learned to make him look good out there and not just have it a totally one-sided match. So to me, plan A would be find another combat sport athlete who's looking to make the crossover, who doesn't have a great wrestling ability, but has other combat sport skills, and then you can make like a super fight. Or you can take a similar approach and find an MMA fighter who's not necessarily signed to the UFC, but someone might sign as a new UFC fighter who has a striking skill set or striking background. I mean, his little scramble with Paulo Costa is legit, and Paulo Costa is legit middleweight. So to see him out there, sparring with boxing and then actually mixing in the wrestling and the grappling, it doesn't mean he could compete against Paulo Costa, but Costa's is a top level middleweight. So to me, that gives me confidence that Logan can go out there and you can find the right person for him to fight. And this is perfect timing, because to all you guys who are saying that Logan Paul shouldn't have been in the champions category in YouTube boxing, this is what I mean. Literally a day later, Dana White is saying that he would potentially have Logan Paul be in the main card or be the main event in a UFC MMA fight. To me, the best part about this entire thing would be Jake Paul and Dana White throughout the press conferences, throughout the build-up of the fight. Would Jake be even backing Logan, right? Would he just be bashing the UFC the entire time? Because this would be a pretty big bag for Logan. So what happens to the undercard fighters? I almost want this to happen just so I can see what Jake does and how he approaches the UFC and how he just is going to be on the sideline in the back attacking UFC fighters and looking for his own fight. That's going to be like the gotcha hat thing he did with Floyd, but 2.0. Let me know what you think. Do you think that Logan Paul will actually ever fight in the UFC? Leave a like and subscribe. Oos.